Hello, my name's Natalie with Perfectly Spoken. Oh, bad hair. Hello and welcome to Lesson 10. This is Lesson 10. It's a review class. So it's a review of Lessons 6, 7, 8 and 9. Okay, so remember with language, it's very important to review all the time. Okay, so let's get started, right? Make sure you have your notebook and your pen. Okay, all right, here we go. So what's in the lesson for today? All right, we've got a review of adverbs of frequency, like sometimes, never, always, hardly ever, occasionally. We've got a review of vocabulary related to jobs and studies. Past simple, form and use. We went into a lot of detail in lesson 8 and 9, so it'll be quite a short practice type of review today. Okay, so are you ready? All right, first of all, the first activity is called Is the sentence right or wrong? Now, I just want to explain what I mean by right or wrong. I don't mean true or false. Okay, by right or wrong, I mean grammatically correct or grammatically incorrect. Okay, so not in terms of true or false. Okay, so here, right means it's grammatically correct, and wrong means it's grammatically incorrect. So this first sentence, I never am late. Is it right or wrong? It's wrong, yes. Why? Because of the position of the adverb with the verb to be. So it should be, I am never late, because it's verb to be, adverb of frequency. Verb to be, adverb of frequency. Verb to be, adverb of frequency. Okay? All right. What about this one? We usually have lunch at about 1:30. We usually have lunch at about 1:30. It's right, yes, because it's adverb of frequency, then the main verb. It's only the verb to be that does it the other way. Okay, so it's correct. Right, next sentence. He sometimes works on Saturdays. He sometimes works on Saturdays. Right or wrong? Right or wrong? Yes, it's right. Because again, you've got the verb works. So the adverb of frequency goes first. Okay, very good. Just one thing, sometimes is a word we use a lot, and it is possible to put it at the beginning of the clause or at the end. Okay, so I have an example here. Sometimes he works on Saturdays, or he works on Saturdays sometimes. You can also do this with the word occasionally. I'm trying to think. Often, sometimes with often, but with hardly ever, no, and never, no. Okay, so some adverbs of frequency are more flexible than others. Okay, so let's have a quick look. Okay, for this section, I'm going to do a quick dictation. So I will say something. I will try to speak naturally. I'll repeat, but I will speak naturally. I am not going to speak like a robot. No, I'm going to speak naturally, but I'll repeat. Okay, so you need to listen and write down the sentences. Right? So, okay. I just have to move my screen. Okay. Ready? My brother usually arrives late home from work. 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 Okay. And the next one. I don't usually work on Friday afternoons. 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 Okay, next one. My mother always cooks chicken on Sundays. My mother always cooks chicken on Sundays. My mother always cooks chicken on Sundays. It's not true. Okay, next one. My son is always grumpy on Sunday evenings. My son is always grumpy on Sunday evenings. My son is always grumpy on Sunday evenings. Okay. And the next one. I hardly ever go to the cinema. I hardly ever go to the cinema. I hardly ever go to the cinema. And the next one. I occasionally watch horror movies. 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 Okay. And the next one. My dad is never on time. My dad is never on time. My dad is never on time. Okay, so you've written them. Now I am going to put the answers on the screen. Okay, so you can check your answers, right? Are you ready? My brother usually arrives late home from work. I don't usually work on Friday afternoons. My mother always cooks chicken on Sundays. My son is always grumpy on Sunday evenings. I hardly ever go to the cinema. I occasionally watch horror movies. My dad is never on time. Okay, so here, just a couple of things. Grumpy, do you remember grumpy? It's like when you're in a bad mood. That's true. My son is grumpy on Sunday evenings because the next day is Monday, of course. And I occasionally watch horror movies. Now, the word movie is an American English word. In British English, it's films. But sometimes we say movies. So you can say, I occasionally watch horror movies, or I occasionally watch horror films. The same. And it's not true. I never watch. Never. No. Too scary. Okay, my dad is never on time. This is true. Now, in the past, no. But now my dad's 81, so he's very slow. So he's always late. Okay. All right. So well done. Check the errors on the dictation. Remember, you can listen again, right? And maybe you can test yourself again in 2 or 3 months just go to the section of the dictation and try again. It's a good way to remember the vocabulary, remember the pronunciation, and to remember the grammar. Okay? All right, so now I'm just going to do a very quick review of the adverbs of frequency that exist, okay? We've got always, usually, pronunciation, not usually, no, usually. It's like a nice soft sound. Sounds a bit French, usually. Okay, often, sometimes, occasionally, hardly ever, and never. Okay. All right, so that's adverbs of frequency. Just going to put on a very quick slide to remind you of the position of the adverbs of frequency. Okay, so you've got, oh, sorry, where am I going? The wrong direction. Okay, here. Verb to be plus the adverb of frequency. So I am always late. Or adverb of frequency plus any other verb. For example, he always works on Fridays. And when there's an auxiliary verb, then the auxiliary verb could be the verb to be, or the auxiliary verb could be the don't or doesn't or didn't, for example. In that case, you put the auxiliary verb between, you put the adverb frequency between. Okay, so for example, he doesn't always like spaghetti. Okay, all right. Now, let's have a look. Are you okay? Yes, there's a lot to remember, but keep going. Remember, you can pause the video, make a cup of tea, relax, make sure your mind is clear. Okay, all right. So, I've lost my, oh, here it is. Okay. I'm going to give you a very, just 4 sentences, a quick test. Okay? All right, so you ready? Okay, put the adverb of frequency in the correct position. All right, he goes to the gym sometimes. And it would be he sometimes goes to the gym. The next one. He is on time. He is never on time. My father cooks. My father hardly ever cooks. In fact, my father never cooks. That's the truth. Okay, let's see. Now, do you remember the question, how often? Yeah, so how often do you go to the gym? In this case, we've got every day. So Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, every day. Or you can say, I go to the gym once a week. I go to the gym twice a week. I go to the gym 3 times a week. I go to the gym 4 times a week, 5 times a week. Okay. Or I go to the gym once a year. I go to the gym twice a year. So this, to answer the question, how often, this kind of expression is very useful. Okay. So, here's some other questions. How often do you get a taxi? Think about it. How often do you get a taxi? You can also say, how often do you take a taxi? How often do you get a taxi to work? How often do you get a taxi? I sometimes get a taxi, probably about twice a month. Something like that, twice a month. And you? Think about it. Okay, the next one. How often do you get a train? Or how often do you take a train? Or how often do you get the train to work? Every day? Once a week? Twice a week? Never? Maybe you drive to work. I don't know. Maybe you don't work. I don't know. Okay. And the last one, how often do you drink coffee? Or how often do you meet friends for coffee? I don't like coffee very much. I drink it sometimes, it's true, but I prefer, of course, I'm English. I prefer a nice cup of tea. Okay. All right. Now, in this section, as you know, I'm going to do a short listening, and I just want you to listen and relax and see what you can understand, okay? So in this listening, I'm going to talk about my first job. So the first, very, very first job that I did, okay? So my first job was a Saturday job. Basically, this is very typical in the UK and England, where you're at school from Monday to Friday, but on Saturdays, maybe you work in a shop or maybe you work in a restaurant. Okay, just one day a week. So this is called a Saturday job. Okay, so my very first job was a Saturday job, and this was a job I did when I was 15. So it was a part-time job because it was just Saturdays, obviously. And I worked in a DIY store. Now, a DIY store, DIY stands for do it yourself. And a DIY store, a DIY store sells things like hammers, nails like this, or screws. They sell tape measures, okay, and these things that I don't know the name of these things. Do you? These things like a sorry, I don't know where it is now. It jumped. Okay, so anyway, my first job was in a DIY store, but this DIY store, apart from selling DIY equipment, it also sold pet food, like food for dogs, for rabbits, for cats, food for cats. And I didn't really like this job. It was very boring, and the shop was always really, really cold. And I didn't get a lot of money from this job. I got 75p an hour. Okay, 75p an hour. So 75p, that's about 70 cents an hour. Yeah, so not very much money. Okay. So I'm going to show you now the text, more or less, and I want you to identify the verbs in the past simple. And obviously you can pause the video and look at the vocabulary as well. Okay, here we go. I changed the colour to wake up. Okay, there we are. So my very first job was a Saturday job. This was a job I did when I was 15, so it was a part-time job. I worked in a DIY store. DIY stands for do it yourself. For example, to make a table, to put up a shelf. Now, this shop sold DIY equipment, and it also sold pet food, food for rabbits, food for dogs, food for cats. I didn't like the job. It was very boring, and the shop was always very, very cold. I didn't get a lot of money from this job, just 75p an hour. So that's about 70 cents an hour. Yes, so not very much. So here you can see highlighted in green the verbs in the past simple. Okay, all right, so yeah, you notice we use was, did, was, worked, past simple, regular verb, sold, sold. Sold comes from the verb to sell, as in, I sell this for £2. You give me the money, I give you the product. Okay, so sold is the past simple of the verb to sell. Didn't like, was, didn't get. Okay, right, so there we are, that was my first job. I didn't like it very much. No. Shh, don't tell anyone, no. And also, this job, I was 15. Now, when you're 15 in the UK, or when I was 15, I couldn't operate the till, the money. It wasn't legal for me to take money because I was 15, not 16. So that's why it was very boring. Okay, all right. So now we're going to look a bit at the grammar very quickly, test you. I'm going to put some sentences up, and I want you to change the sentence from present simple to past simple, okay? Just say it. Or if you prefer, pause and write the sentence, okay? All right, so here we go. Change these sentences from present simple to past simple. He is a teacher. He was a teacher. My brother and sister are surgeons. Surgeons. My brother and sister were surgeons. My brother and sister were surgeons. There are a lot. Oh, sorry. The name. There are a lot of people in the restaurant. Listen to the pronunciation. There are a lot of people. There are a lot of people in the restaurant. It's easier to pronounce in the past, in fact. There were a lot of people in the restaurant. There were a lot of people in the restaurant. We travel a lot. It's a regular verb, so we travelled a lot. We travelled a lot. He works here. He worked here. He worked here. Okay. Now, we've got the verbs, sentences from before in the past. Now you have to put them into negative. Okay. So he was a teacher. He wasn't a teacher. My brother and sister were surgeons. My brother and sister weren't surgeons. There were a lot of people in the restaurant. There weren't a lot of people in the restaurant. We travelled a lot. Don't forget the auxiliary verb. We didn't travel a lot. Did you remember? Because the other one's the verb to be, so you just add not. But these ones are not with the verb to be, so you use the auxiliary verb. Okay. He worked here. He didn't work here. Okay. Right, so it's a good idea to practice this, writing sentences and changing them into negative, writing a present simple sentence, changing it into past, just to practice the mechanics. Also, I wrote about my first job. You can write about your first job if you have had a job. Okay, depends. If you are 16 years old, probably you don't have a job, but it depends. Okay, all right. Now, here I'll just show you quickly. This is the past simple negative highlighted. Okay, so you can see the difference between the verb to be and the negative of the other verbs. Right? Okay. Let's see now. Now, in this slide, you can see lots of different people doing different jobs. Okay? So I'm going to describe the job, and I want you to guess which job. So which job am I talking about? Okay. So this job is, well, you have to be good at DIY to do this job. You have to be good at DIY. Normally, you are quite strong, and you have to wear special clothes like a hat to protect your head. Yeah, so which job am I talking about? Obviously, yes, I'm talking about a builder or a construction worker. Okay, in this job, you design houses. Your work timetable might be flexible. It depends. And you have to work with a computer program that helps you in your work. Okay? So, yes, I'm talking about the woman here. She's an architect. Yes, an architect. Here she is. Okay? Right. And do you remember the expression? So we've got here a construction worker or a builder, got an estate agent, a person that sells houses. We've got an architect, a person who designs houses. We've got a carpenter, somebody who works with wood, making furniture, for example. And then in this last picture here, the man with the computer, what was the other expression we had? If you don't have a specific job, but you want to talk about the type of field you work in. So, for example, if we could say, this man, he works in IT, or I work in education, or I work in the art world, or I work in science. Okay. Now, I think here I have this surgeon. And what do you remember what this job is here? These people here, they are scientists. Notice scientist. So it's a scientist, not a scientific. Okay, a scientist. All right. Now here we have a list of some other jobs. I'll just quickly explain them all. So a carpenter works with wood. A plumber works with what? A plumber works with pipes, water pipes. Yeah. A construction worker, we saw a doctor, a nurse. Nurses are very important people in hospitals because the nurse usually has more contact with the patient than the doctor. So the Nurses are very, very, very important people. Always be nice to your nurse. Okay, and then we've got surgeon, as we saw before, a computer programmer, a PA. What's a PA? Do you remember? A PA is a personal assistant. We've got an engineer, a psychologist, a physiotherapist, a dentist. Okay, so lots of different jobs. Make sure you know how to talk about your job and how to talk about your career. Okay, right, so now we're just going to do a very quick activity related to past simple. Okay, so I'm just going to ask you a question and just choose your answer. There's no right or wrong answer. Okay, no right or wrong answer. All right, so here we go. I like this activity. Okay, so it's what did you do last night? I went out. I stayed in. I had dinner with my family. Or I can't remember. Which one? For me, it's B and C. I stayed in and I had dinner with my family. If you can't remember what you did last night, that's a problem. Okay. All right. Next question. We've got 2 questions. What did you do last summer? So I travelled with my family. I didn't have a holiday because I was working. I went to France. I can't remember. You'll be surprised. Often I ask my students these questions, and I can't remember is a very, very common answer. Okay. So for me, what did you? Last summer I went to France. So for me, it's the okay. Obviously, maybe your answer is I went to Japan or I went to New York. Okay. Right. Who did you have dinner with last night? Okay. And the options are with my partner. Your partner could be your boyfriend, your girlfriend, your husband, your wife. Depends. My partner, with my family, with my dog, maybe, with some friends, or alone. Alone is with no one. So for me, my answer is B. What's yours? Okay. And there is another option. I didn't have dinner. Is that your option? I didn't have dinner. I did. I had dinner with my family, pizza, because it was Friday. Friday night is pizza night in my house. Okay. Now, just a very, very last quick thing to talk about pronunciation. Remember the pronunciation past simple regular verbs are easy to remember, but the pronunciation is difficult, okay? Especially the ones on the left, okay? So, for example, we've got walked, worked, watched, asked, liked, promised, finished. And a softer sound, arrived, travelled, leaved. And the last 4 verbs here are verbs where you add an extra syllable to the infinitive. So it's want is the infinitive, wanted. Notice that with walk is walk, walked. 1 syllable, 1 syllable. Work, worked. 1 syllable, 1 syllable. But with the last ones, the ones ending in T or D, they're wanted, needed, hated, rated. Okay, so just remember that when you're speaking. All right. So now we're going to do a very quick activity. Just with very quick. So just say the verb. I'm going to give you the infinitive. You say the past simple irregular form of the verb. See if you can say it before I show you the answer. Okay? All right, so let's have a go. Ready? Are you ready? Steady? Go. Go. Went. See. Saw. Have. Had. Think. Thought. Pronunciation. Say. Said. Pronunciation. Said, not said. Said. Buy. Bought. Made. Make. Find. Found. Okay, very good. Well done. Okay, so that was the review lesson for today. We did a lot in this class. Remember, you can go back on the website to review the classes. If there was something difficult, just watch the lesson again and again and again and again, because practice makes perfect. Okay, so just a reminder, in this lesson, we did a review of adverbs of frequency, a review of vocabulary related to jobs and studies, and past simple form and use. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed that lesson. I hope you found it useful. And remember, if you are a subscriber, you can do the test at the end of the lesson, okay? Just to check everything's okay. All right, so thank you very much for joining me. Have a very nice morning, afternoon, weekend, week, okay? And I will see you very, very soon, okay? Bye. See you in lesson 11. Bye.